The rain had started as a drizzle in the late afternoon, just light enough to bead on the windows and make the world outside look like a blurred watercolor painting. By evening, though, it had turned into a steady downpour, hammering the roof in a relentless rhythm that made the whole house feel small and cocooned. Emma sat curled up on the couch under a fleece blanket, a half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the coffee table, her phone glowing in her hand. The living room was her favorite place when it rained. The big picture window looked out onto the street, and she liked watching cars splash past, their headlights slicing through the storm. Her parents had left 20 minutes ago, the taillights of their car vanishing into the sheets of rain. Her mom had poked her head in before leaving. "Lock all the doors and don't open for anyone," she'd said in that overly cautious tone parents use even when you're practically an adult. "We'll be back by 10. It's just an hour, okay?" "Got it," Emma had replied, with a roll of her eyes. Still, she had gone around and checked the locks, just to humor her mom. Now the house was quiet except for the storm, and that familiar thrill of being completely alone was starting to set in. She loved nights like this, when the world felt small and safe, like nothing bad could reach her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lila, her best friend. "Lila, this rain is nuts. Feels like end-of-the-world weather." Emma, "Yeah. Perfect horror movie vibes, lol." Lila, "Ugh, don't say that. You home alone?" Emma, "Yep. 1 hour of peace before my parents get back." Lila, "Peace? Girl, this is how horror movies start." Emma, "Stop. Face with tears of joy, I'm fine. It's cozy." She sent the message, but as her eyes drifted to the window, she paused. Across the street, at the edge of the yellow glow from the nearest street lamp, someone was standing there. A tall figure, hood up, hands at their sides, completely still. Emma squinted. It was hard to tell through the rain if they were looking at her house or just standing there for some reason. A car came down the street, its headlights washing everything in harsh white light for a split second, and in that instant the figure was gone. Emma blinked. Maybe she'd imagined it. She drew the curtains closed, a tiny shiver running through her despite the warm blanket around her shoulders. Back on the couch, she unmuted the TV and turned up the volume a little. A sitcom was playing, bright, cheerful, canned laughter filling the room. Normalcy. But now she couldn't stop hearing other sounds layered under the storm. A faint creak, somewhere upstairs. A soft tap, tap, tap from the back of the house. The refrigerator hum growing louder, as if straining. Emma grabbed the remote and paused the TV again. Silence. She waited, heart beating a little too fast. Nothing. With a nervous laugh, she shook her head and stood up, walking into the kitchen to grab another soda. The house felt different in the dark kitchen. The rain sounded louder against the back door. She glanced outside through the sliding glass window, nothing but the patio, glistening wet, reflecting the pale glow from the kitchen's digital clock. As she turned back toward the fridge, she thought she saw something move in her peripheral vision. Her breath caught and she spun around. No one was there. She stood perfectly still for a few seconds, then shook her head and let out a slow breath. Get a grip, Emma. Grabbing the soda, she returned to the living room, but this time she sat with her blanket pulled a little tighter. She tried to focus on the TV, but her mind kept drifting back to the figure outside. Why had they just been standing there? Was it even a person? Maybe it was a trick of the light or a neighbor walking their dog. She told herself that was all it was. But just as she was about to press play, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, just the screen lighting up with a random notification before going black. She frowned. The battery was still at 70%, but for some reason the phone felt cold in her hand. Thunder cracked outside, so loud it rattled the windows, and Emma jumped. Then, faintly, she heard it, another tap. This one wasn't outside. It came from the back of the house. Emma stayed frozen for a long moment, listening, but heard nothing more. She told herself it was probably just a loose shutter or a branch hitting the window. But still, her heart wouldn't stop racing. For the first time that night, she wished her parents would come home early. The house had grown unbearably quiet. Emma sat rigid on the couch, her soda untouched, every sound amplified by the storm outside. The TV remained paused, frozen on a frame of smiling characters, like they were mocking her unease. Another crack of thunder rattled the window panes, but this time, over the noise of the storm, Emma heard something else. Tap, tap, tap. This time she knew it wasn't in her head. It was coming from the kitchen. Her whole body tensed as she stood, setting her phone down and clutching the flashlight her dad kept in the drawer. The kitchen light was off, leaving only the green glow of the oven clock. The rain distorted her reflection in the sliding glass door, making it look like a stranger staring back at her. Tap. The sound came again, right in front of her now. Emma turned on the flashlight, shining it through the glass. The backyard was empty, except for the sheets of rain and the swinging wind chimes her mom had hung by the door. She exhaled shakily, lowering the flashlight, then froze. On the kitchen floor, glistening in the faint light, was a trail of wet footprints. Not shoe prints, bare, human footprints. They led from the sliding door toward the laundry room. Emma's throat went dry. The back door is locked, she thought, panic rising like a wave. How could anyone get inside? She backed away, her mind racing. Her first thought was to call her parents, but as she grabbed her phone, the screen glitched, lines flickering across it before going completely black. Dead. Her heart thudded in her ears. The house suddenly felt alive, like it was holding its breath with her. Then came the sound that turned her fear into pure terror. A soft shuffle from the laundry room. Someone was in the house. Emma stumbled back, clutching the flashlight so tightly it hurt. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Her brain screamed run, but where? The front door was at the other end of the house. If she went for it and whoever was inside saw her, she decided to bolt for the stairs. Her socked feet barely made a sound on the hardwood floor, but to her own ears it felt deafening. Halfway up, she heard another noise, a low, dragging sound from the hall below, like someone's hand trailing along the wall. She reached her room and slammed the door shut, locking it. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps as she backed against her bed. The flashlight beam jittered across posters and bookshelves, making her familiar room look strange and alien. For several minutes, there was only the sound of rain and her own breathing. Then, the faintest creak of the stairs. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was coming up. Emma clamped a hand over her mouth, tears prickling her eyes. Think, think, think. She spotted her desk lamp, yanked the cord from the wall, and gripped it like a weapon. The footsteps stopped outside her room. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Emma's heart nearly stopped. The lock held, but the knob jiggled softly, as though whoever was there was testing it, patiently. The turning stopped. A second later, something slid under the door. A piece of paper. Emma stared at it, afraid to move. Finally, she crouched, never taking her eyes off the door, and picked it up. The words, written in what looked like smeared mud, or was it something darker, were simple. I see you. Emma's stomach turned over. She stumbled back, clutching the paper like it was something poisonous. And then came the sound that nearly made her drop it, the whisper. Right outside her door, low and almost playful. Where are you going, Emma? Emma's blood ran cold. She didn't know how they knew her name. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed herself against the far wall. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, footsteps retreating down the hall. Emma barely breathed until they faded completely. She wanted to stay locked in her room until her parents came home. She wanted to believe this was over. But then a horrible thought struck her. What if whoever was in the house wasn't running away? What if they were waiting? Her parents would be home soon. If the intruder was here when they arrived. Emma wiped her face with the back of her hand and forced herself to stand. She couldn't stay put. She had to get out, or at least get to the phone downstairs. Unlocking the door, she stepped into the hallway, her legs shaking. The upstairs hall was empty, but the air felt heavier somehow, like the house was holding something secret. She crept down the stairs, pausing at each one to listen. The kitchen was dark. The footprints were still there, glistening faintly. And then Emma saw something that nearly made her scream. The laundry room door was open now. Just a few inches, but enough to see that the light inside was on. Someone had turned it on while she was upstairs. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as she stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the narrow opening of the laundry room door. The yellow light spilling into the kitchen looked wrong somehow, too warm, too inviting, as though it were bait. She tightened her grip on the flashlight until her knuckles went white. I could run for the front door, she thought, glancing toward the hallway. It was maybe 15 feet away. She could make it if she ran fast enough. But something stopped her. The footprints. They didn't lead toward the front of the house. They led straight into the laundry room. And they didn't lead back out. Which meant whoever was inside was still in there. Emma's stomach twisted. "Whoever you are," she called, her voice cracking, "you need to leave. Right now. The police are on their way." Her words echoed through the house. Silence. Then, from the laundry room, a sound so soft it made her skin crawl. Laughter. Low, wet-sounding, almost like it was coming from deep in someone's chest. Emma stumbled backward until she hit the counter. Her body screamed at her to run, but something inside her hardened. She was done being cornered. She raised the flashlight and inched forward. The floorboards creaked under her bare feet, each step louder than she wanted it to be. When she reached the laundry room door, she shoved it open with the flashlight like a weapon. The room was empty. No one behind the door. No one crouched behind the washing machine. But on the floor, just in the middle of the room, lay a wet hoodie. Emma stared at it, her breath coming in shallow gasps. It was dark gray, soaked through as though it had been worn outside in the rain. And it wasn't hers. She turned to back out of the room, and saw him, standing in the kitchen doorway, blocking her way out. Emma's heart stopped. The man was tall, his hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. His face was pale, too pale, with dark hollows under his eyes. He smiled. "You're braver than I thought," he said softly, as if they'd been having a conversation for hours. Emma's legs nearly gave out. She backed up until she was pressed against the washing machine, the flashlight trembling in her grip. "What do you want?" she managed to choke out. The man tilted his head as though considering. "Just to see how you do. Alone. 1 hour. That's all." His calmness made her skin crawl. "You need to leave," she said, louder this time. Instead, he stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Emma's survival instincts kicked in. She swung the flashlight with every ounce of strength she had. It connected with a sickening crack against his arm. He staggered, cursing under his breath, and Emma bolted past him, her feet slipping on the wet floor as she sprinted toward the front door. Behind her, she heard him recover, his footsteps pounding after her. She reached the door and yanked on the lock, her fingers fumbling. Too slow. A hand grabbed her by the ankle, yanking her backwards so hard she hit the floor. Pain shot up her spine as she kicked wildly, connecting once with his face. He grunted, loosening his grip, and Emma scrambled to her feet, adrenaline giving her strength she didn't know she had. She tore open the front door and ran barefoot into the storm. The cold rain hit her like ice, but she didn't stop. She sprinted across the yard, slipping in the mud, and banged on the neighbor's door. "Help!" she screamed, pounding until her fists hurt. "Someone's in my house." Lights flicked on inside, and moments later, Mr. Garrison, their neighbor, opened the door, his face pale when he saw her. "Emma? What?" Before he could finish, a shadow appeared in the doorway of Emma's house. The intruder stood there, framed by the warm glow of the kitchen light, watching her from across the yard. And then, without a word, he stepped back inside. By the time the police arrived minutes later, the house was empty. No sign of forced entry. No footprints except the ones Emma had seen, and by then, even those were smudged by rainwater. No wet hoodie in the laundry room. It was as if the man had never been there at all. But Emma knew better. He had been there. And he had promised her something. 1 hour. Emma stayed at the neighbor's house until her parents arrived. Her mom wrapped her in a towel, crying as she asked questions Emma couldn't even answer, at least not in a way that made sense. He was in the house, Emma kept repeating, her voice hoarse from screaming. He was watching me the whole time. He knew my name. The police walked through the house twice, even checked the crawlspace and attic. But there was nothing. No muddy footprints, no wet clothes, no sign of forced entry. Could have been a prank, one of the officers said gently. Maybe someone from school messing with you? Emma shook her head. No. He wasn't joking. The officer exchanged a look with her parents, one of those silent conversations adults have when they don't want to scare you more than you already are. When the police left, Emma refused to stay in the house. She slept in the neighbor's guest room that night, too shaken to be alone. But sleep didn't bring relief. She dreamed of the laundry room light, of the paper sliding under her door, of that wet, dripping hoodie lying on the floor. When she woke up in the middle of the night, she swore she could still hear footsteps outside the window. The next morning, Emma's parents tried to act normal. They made pancakes, turned on the news, chatted about how the storm had knocked power out for half the block. But Emma couldn't sit still. The house felt wrong now, like the walls had been listening. At noon, she decided to go back to her room to grab some clothes. Her mom offered to go with her, but Emma shook her head. She needed to face it. Upstairs, her room was just as she'd left it. Messy bed, open closet, the desk lamp lying where she dropped it. For a second, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined everything. Then she saw it. On her desk. A piece of paper. Not the one from last night. This was new. The words were written neatly this time, in perfect black ink. Round 2. Emma's hands shook as she picked it up. Someone had been in her room again. She ran downstairs, her breathing ragged, and showed it to her parents. Her dad went pale and called the police again, but by the time they arrived, the note was gone. Just gone. For the rest of the week, Emma barely slept. Every sound in the house made her jump. Every knock at the door sent her heart into overdrive. She started keeping a baseball bat by her bed, and even when her parents were home, she double-checked the locks before they went to sleep. She kept telling herself she was safe now, that whoever it was had gotten bored and moved on. But deep down, she knew it wasn't over. Exactly 7 nights later, the rain returned. Emma was sitting in her room, headphones on, when she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Not at the kitchen door this time. At her bedroom window. Her breath hitched as she slowly turned. Outside, barely visible through the streaking rain, was a figure. The same figure. Standing in the yard, looking up at her window. Even from a distance, she could see his smile. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over the bat. Her parents rushed in at her scream, but by the time they reached the window, the yard was empty. Only the wet grass showed signs of anyone being there, large footprints leading up to the window, and stopping there, as if whoever had been standing there had simply disappeared into the night. Emma didn't sleep at all after that. Her parents talked about moving. The police promised to patrol the area more often. But Emma knew it wouldn't matter. Because this wasn't random. The man hadn't broken in to rob them, or to hurt her family. He had chosen her. And he wasn't done. Weeks later, Emma was sitting alone again, this time in her new bedroom in the new house, when she heard a faint sound from under the door. She froze. A piece of paper slid into the room. Her heart thudded as she picked it up. It was just 2 words, scrawled in the same black ink as before. 1 hour. Her phone buzzed at the same moment. An unknown number. A text message. Unknown, ready? Emma dropped the phone. She realized then what the man had meant the night he stood in her kitchen. It hadn't just been a threat. It had been a promise. The hour had started over. Closing image and lesson. Emma sits on the floor of her new bedroom, the note clenched in her hand, the clock ticking loudly in the silence. She knows she has 60 minutes before he makes his next move. Maybe tonight, maybe next week, maybe next month. She's no longer the girl who thought nights alone were cozy. She's no longer the girl who felt safe in a locked house. She has learned the most horrifying truth of all. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the intruder who breaks in. It's the one who promises to come back.